between them.
Hey, Ray,
They're all
Veronica
very
Jean
similar.
died.
I wrote a story about it.
Oh, did you?
Okay, I want to thank everybody for coming to join the celebration here. And,
I'll drink to that.
I want to thank Joyce for being such a great organizer and doing such a super job and telling me what to do. I was the dumb laborer and she was the management on this project. So thank you very much, Joyce. I also wanted to acknowledge a debt of gratitude to my son. Where the hell did he? Oh, there he is. My son Emmett, and to John Payne, and to my cousin Jean, who's in St. Joe, Missouri. They were my beta readers, and it's a better book because of their critiques. So. And also, finally, want to thank my daughter here, Teresa, who's going to be doing some videotaping, and my son-in-law John, who's been taking some stills. Probably will be posting those on Facebook and on my website. So those of you in the witness protection program that don't want to be included, please note your objection. Writing Finis Republicae took about 2.5 years to get to this point where it could be published. The commentary usually is that the pace of publishing is glacial, and apparently that's true for self-publishing as well as the traditional operation. A lot of the time I spent though was on research. What I knew was woefully incomplete in terms of the history of ancient Rome when it came time to fold it into a story about the times. In doing that research, I relied quite a bit on translations of Livy and Appian and of course the biographies by Plutarch, all of which is online, and that was a lot easier being able to pull that information up and organize it in a way that would provide background for a story like this. One difference with Finis Republicae as opposed to the college, I actually hired an editor, and that was the smartest thing I could have done. It's made it a much more readable book, I think. People do not slow down to comment to themselves about the typos and the errors in punctuation and what have you. My interest in the ancient world started back in high school when I took Latin. And the stories of those people, the story of that language, created a real interest in that time, and in particular and in history in general. So that I did my college major was history, and there's a temptation, I know, to draw parallels between contemporary United States and ancient Rome. Some of them may be applicable, but you have to be cautious about that. That notwithstanding, you cannot help but be struck by the extent to that what we are today is a product of what they were. The detailed, or the book itself deals with the events that lead up to and include the First Civil War of the ancient Roman Republic. And that occurred about a generation before Julius Caesar rose to power. The story starts in 89 BC. Caesar was 11 years old then. There are historical and fictional characters. The historical characters include Gaius Marius, who was a low-born common man who rose to the heights of power in Rome, was elected consul of the Republic 6 times, and was very much a champion of the popularis faction, a political, not really a political party, but a faction that favored the commoners, the plebeians, especially the urban plebeians. His opponent was Lucius Cornelius Sulla. Sulla was a brilliant general, a man of patrician, but of rather ordinary upbringing and history. But he was supported by the nobles and the patricians. And the conflict between them would eventually lead to civil war, the first civil war of the Republic. Their usual take, historical take, is that this was commoners versus aristocrats. But it's a little bit more complicated than that. And I hope I've gone into that a little bit as part of the background of the book. It's still a story about people and about men, and particularly about the fictional characters here who are caught up in these events that lead to the end of the Republic, which is the translation for Finis Republicae. Technically, this wasn't the end of the Republic. That didn't happen until Caesar was named dictator for life. But this was the turning point. After this, there was no other alternative. So, in any event, the story begins at the end of the war that had developed between the Italian allies who were in rebellion against the dominance of Rome in the peninsula of Italy. And what I like to do, kind of as a teaser, is read the first scene of the first chapter. Marcus Viatori sprinted just ahead of the line of 30 legionaries running abreast across the open ground. The copse of trees to his right obscured his view of the main battle and the rest of the army, though he could still hear the horns, whistles, shouts, and screams of the main engagement. The bright sunlight was behind him. He was gasping for breath now, and sweat ran down his chest beneath his mail shirt. The raiding party of Italian rebels, allied against Rome, that was attacking the baggage train, had not yet seen their approach. The raiders numbered about 100. He glanced quickly over his shoulder, looking beyond his own troops. No help was coming from the main formation. It would be up to him and the few troops he led to protect the army's supplies. He tightened his grip on his scutum, the tall curved shield, and his gladius, the short stabbing sword, both of which were the hallmarks of the Roman legion. As in his 4 previous battles, the fear of pain and death clenched his heart. I cannot run away. My men need me. I must be brave. They were only a few paces from the back of the rebel line when the latter became aware of them. A ragged crashing of shield on shield and sword on sword came as the men of the Marcus's centuria charged into the Italians. Marcus hit a small, light-skinned man squarely with his scutum. The little man tried awkwardly to stab at him over the shield. At the same time, Marcus drove his gladius deep into the man's chest. The light skin got lighter, and an expression of surprise and then pain appeared on the man's face. He fell backwards, emitting a high-pitched, whining scream. Knowing that he had delivered a mortal blow, Marcus ignored him and looked for the next enemy. For a brief moment he was blinded by smoke from a burning wagon and his own sweat running into his eyes. Marcus stepped back and ignored the rising shouts of rage and pain and terror, the stench of blood, urine, and feces. His excitement ebbed. I'm in command here. I don't need to be on the line. I need to see what's happening. He took 2 steps back and assessed the skirmish. His men were tired, and they had been fighting all morning in the main battle before the city of Ausculum. But they were veterans. Weariness was nothing new to them. What he saw eased his fears. The troops guarding the supply train, seeing the onslaught of Marcus and his men, took heart. The raiders had been unprepared. They were caught between Marcus and his band and the troops guarding the supplies. The rebels fell to the stabbing, slashing, shoving Romans. Their superior numbers were no help. A shrill horn signaled the rebels to retreat, and they were pulling away now, trying to escape the hammer and anvil of the Roman soldiers. Marcus did not want to give them the chance to regroup. "After them," he shouted, "chase them down." As Marcus drew a deep breath to join the chase, he saw one straggler, a huge Italian, perhaps Etrurian, approaching the prone and thrashing body of a Roman officer. Terror seized Marcus and his breath died in his throat. The fallen man was Horatio Paulus, his friend from childhood. Leadership, duty, training, all were forgotten. Saving Horatio was the only thing that mattered. He charged the rebel. The noise of the battle helped Marcus. The big soldier attacking Horatio never heard him coming. Marcus thought he hit the man hard enough with his scutum to knock him down, but the rebel only staggered and turned on Marcus viciously. Marcus took a fighting stance, left foot slightly forward, shield at the ready, gladius at his waist with his arm flexed to stab. Again, the fear of death and pain gripped him. The bearded face of the enemy was smeared with blood and dirt, but his eyes were clear and fierce. He roared and swept his long broadsword straight down at Marcus's head. Marcus crouched and raised his shield, ducked his head, and felt the heavy blow deflected. As the attacker raised his sword again, Marcus quickly stabbed the man's unprotected upper leg. He felt the blade of his gladius deflecting on the thigh bone. As the rebel's second stroke fell on his shield, Marcus exploded from his crouch and drove his enemy back. A deluge of blood spurted from the man's wounds. The rebel staggered, his face now white beneath the grime. One more step forward and then he collapsed, face down in the blood-soaked mud. Marcus snapped his head around to look for other threats. One of the supply wagons was on its side and another was burning, oxen low in distress. A gust of wind cleared the smoke and he saw his troops pursuing the rest of the Italian rebels. The afternoon sun dimmed as another gust made the smoke eddy around him. Seeing no immediate threats, he turned to help Horatio to his feet. "Are you hurt?" His friend struggled to free himself from the tangle of his own cloak. His helmet tumbled off as he jerked the fabric. His own urine dripped from the armor protecting his lower legs. Finally free, Horatio steadied himself on the nearby wagon wheel. Marcus surveyed the battlefield. His soldiers had stopped their pursuit of the raiding party and were returning to him. The supplies were saved, and so was Horatio. Marcus repeated his question. No, I'm all right," said Horatio. Horatio looked around, then faced Marcus, surprised. He said, "You saved my life. That traitor would have hacked me apart." "He will do no hacking now," said Marcus, gesturing to the dead man lying in the puddle of his own blood. Horatio picked up his helmet and secured the ties under his chin. He straightened his cloak. "Thank you, Marcus. Are you all right? There's blood on your armor." Marcus, still breathing and gasped, but more slowly, checked himself for wounds. He found none and wondered whether the fates were storing up some dreadful injuries for him. In combat 4 times and not a scratch. That isn't right. I'm a good swordsman, but not that good. Horatio marched along the line of carts and wagons, surveying the damage and ordering men to extinguish the fire, clear the wreckage, and reorganize the baggage. Marcus recalled his own troops, half of his centurion, and started back toward the main battle and what he expected would be the anger of his centurion. Halfway back to the formation, Flaccus Fulbus met him, tapping his chest with his baton. The centurion was a short man, but built like a tree stump. He was scowling. Marcus knew he was a ferocious soldier, especially when it came to discipline. Sweat trickled down his neck. "Explain yourself, Optio," said Fulbus, addressing Marcus by his rank as second in command of the centurion. "I did what I thought was best, centurion. The rebels were..." "I know what the rebels were doing," growled Flaccus. "Why didn't you tell me before you took half the centurion?" In the distance, perhaps 1/2 of a stadia to the northeast, Marcus again heard the roar of the main battle. The noise seemed somewhat diminished. Through breaks in the smoke and dust, he glimpsed the walls of the northern Italian city of Ausculum. There wasn't time. The Italians were on top of the baggage train, and the guards weren't ready for them. I had to act immediately. It worked. We drove off the attack. Food and supplies are safe. So is Tribune Horatio Emilius Paulus. Humph, grumbled Flaccus. He's a tribune in name only, praepositus in charge of oxen and carts. He's also my friend and the son of my father's patron, said Marcus. Our maniple was in the rear, just relieved from the line. I thought I had time before we were recalled. All right, Victorious, you did the right thing, but next time let me know. Send a message. Yes, said Jerry. As it happens, the battle is nearly over. The rebels are fleeing. Strabo can take the city now. Though he could not see it, Marcus could imagine the outcome. The fleeing men would run away, dropping their weapons and shields, trying desperately to escape. Few of them would make it. They would be ridden down by the cavalry and cut down from behind. He had seen it happen before to a Roman centurion in an earlier battle. No ordered retreat, just terrified flight. The bloodletting had made him vomit. Now the images of certain carnage that came to his mind only left him cold and weary. As he organized his men to march back to the battlefield, Marcus looked over his shoulder and saw Horatio staring at him. Their eyes met. Horatio's expression was serious, respectful. He nodded once, turned, and walked away. Marcus heard the rumble of thunder and looked to the northwest, into the wind. The afternoon sun shone brightly on the anvil-topped clouds. The storm was coming. A bad omen for the people of Osculum. Okay?
Very nice. Very vividly written. Powerful.
So I hope that's an effective teaser. If you'd like to, it's certainly not required. And I didn't invite people here just to sell books. I invited you here because I wanted you to share a happy moment. But Joyce's husband Tony is available to take your money and sell you a copy of Finis, or a copy of the college which preceded it, which is an entirely different subject matter.
Is it time for the critique?